And as if the Democrat Party was intent on proving this week how crazy they are being, the Daily Wire reported on an investigation that was conducted by the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. So these are professionals. You may disagree with their politics, but that doesn't change the fact that they are professionals in this field, who proved that insanely leftist activist groups such as Aid Access, a name you need to get familiar with, are so equally out of their minds that they will and did send out dangerous abortion pills despite an insane number of red flags being deliberately waved in front of their faces to see what they would do. An investigator from the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, doctors, wanted to see how this activist group would respond to a truly extreme case. So they made it as extreme as they possibly could. And she told this leftist activist group that she was a 13-year-old girl who had already had 3 C-section births and was currently on other complicating medications, and then asked them to ship her abortion pills. The pills arrived on her doorstep in Indiana right away. No questions asked, no safety being practiced to make sure that this irresponsible 13-year-old girl, because you are irresponsible if you've been pregnant 3 times by 13, to make sure that she didn't bleed out in a bathroom somewhere. This was just unfettered extremism cranked up to 100 miles an hour because that's the only way that they know how to go about anything. And this is what happens when you let them do that. When you let those kind of people take over an entire party. And that party is in power in certain places. After what happened during their exploration of any non-existent, it turns out, safety rails, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, AAPLOG, wrote a letter to Republican lawmakers this week which stated, what this investigation uncovered is far from anything that could be called health care. In fact, it should be considered medical malpractice. Now, just for some background here, thanks to Biden, the restrictions that did used to exist as guardrails around mail-order abortion pills, which required the patient to be seen in person at a real doctor's appointment first, were obliterated for no reason. And as a result, there have been many cases of boyfriends pretending to be women online, which they were able to do because no in-person appointment was required first, and then ordering the abortion pills online and drugging their pregnant girlfriends against their will. Yeah, this is great for women having the right to choose what happens to their bodies. That reckless and entirely unnecessary decision has never been reversed to bring things back to the status quo of just a few years ago, where doctors are required to be involved in the administration of this drug, which is done directly to patients when doctors are involved, instead of distributing the drug to anyone that's hiding on the other side of a screen for nefarious reasons. Okay, I don't care what your stand on abortion is for the context of this conversation. If you actually want women to have the choice instead of abusers, and you don't want activists doing dangerous things with kids, then you should be for having to go to a simple doctor's appointment. What is the case against it? The investigator, Dr. Christina Francis, the one who was posing as a 13-year-old girl, the 13-year-old girl who had already had 3 C-sections, also told Aid Access on their intake form that the child that she was pretending to be was on blood thinners. I mean, in case you don't understand, abortion pills make you bleed massively. That she also had an intrauterine device and a history of ectopic pregnancies. Like I told you, they went all out to make this as glaringly extreme as possible. Not one of those contraindicated conditions deterred Aid Access from shipping out the highly dangerous pills to this uninformed 13-year-old minor. They arrived 4 days after they were ordered with this troubling information. Dr. Francis reported that Aid Access did not ask for any ID verification, which is how abusive boyfriends are getting their hands on this dangerous drug and using it against unwilling women. They also required no confirmation at all that the recipient was even pregnant, or any indication that she had had a consultation with any kind of medical professional, despite this activist group claiming, obviously falsely, on their website that they would have a medical professional review the answers on their medical questionnaire. But any true medical professional would have balked at the things that were listed on that intake form in this case. Things that are so glaring that all of us know their problems, proving that the guardrails are a bunch of entirely fictional smoke. Within 2 minutes of filling out and submitting her form as this 13-year-old girl, Dr. Francis received a follow-up email with payment information and no indication that anyone had reviewed the medical information during those 2 intervening minutes. Extremist liars is the pattern emerging over and over again in all of these stories. It's okay for me to lie to you in order to accomplish my political ends. The American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs told lawmakers in their letter to test the level of medical review and due diligence. We intentionally put red flags in our answers with several contraindications so ridiculous any one of them should have been a hard stop for a physician conducting an in-person screening and informed consent. However, we were shockingly allowed to complete the process. The intake process did not include a live consultation with a medical professional, such as what would happen with a telehealth visit. Even an asynchronous review of the user's health information did not occur, as the payment link was emailed less than 2 minutes after the request was submitted. And the abortion pills were sent from a generic address in California, not a professional one, which also does not speak to any sort of quality safety controls being practiced by this incredibly irresponsible extremist activist group who only cares about their crusading cause and not about the literal blood that they spill. AAPLOG warned that this recklessness enables young children, like the one that they were pretending to be, who are nowhere near informed, to access pills that can be deadly, and doing so incredibly easy, as well as enabling abusers to take away a woman's right to choose, when simple guardrails could correct this. As I said, several men across this country have been charged with inflicting forced abortions on unwilling women using the abortion pills that they ordered online from irresponsible groups like this one. They are not heroes protecting women the way that they try to position themselves as being. They are actual enablers of the abusers, and they're monsters. The AAPLOG is asking lawmakers to use their power to restore common sense and the basic safeguards that we had just a couple of years ago to mail-order abortion pill industry, regulating distribution in the way that it was always regulated before Joe Biden. This is not new. It's just go back to sanity. In order to protect both women and babies from the soulless activists who don't care about the human damage that they cause as long as they get their way. They prove over and over again that that is all that they care about. And speaking of other kinds of horrific damage that are likewise entirely avoidable and thus optional, it's being deliberately decided to allow this. Horrific surveillance video showed 6 armed teenagers surrounding a 74-year-old man on July 7th outside of a 7-Eleven convenience store in Baltimore and brutally assaulting him for a prolonged period of time. One of these young black males was carrying a gray assault rifle. Another one of them had a sword. Welcome to extreme crime in blue cities that refuse to stop going soft on it. That's the optional part. The Baltimore Police Department is currently conducting a manhunt for these 6 thugs who like to beat up on elderly senior citizens. What lowlifes. Oh, we're so impressed. And police are asking for the public's help to identify these sword-wielding brutes. Anyone with information about them is asked to call the citywide robbery detectives at 410-366-6311. One more time, that is 410-366-6311. As for the video, it shows a young man dressed in a black hoodie running up to this man in his 70s and shoving an assault rifle in his face. The impressive old man stood his ground, even as 5 more thugs formed a mob and tried to break into his car and rob him. Then the thugs started throwing things at the 74-year-old man for no reason, and one of them ran up from behind, of course, because they're cowards, and shoved him to the ground. But even then, while he was lying on the pavement, knowing that panic and fear would only make it worse, like blood in the water, this old man refused to stop fighting for his life. On his back, he kicked and fought back while trying to shield his face from the barrage of punches that were being thrown by these criminal oppressors. And yes, they are oppressors. Because oppression is not determined by the color of your skin, whatever you've been told, but by your actions. And when you have an elderly person on the ground and you are beating them up, you are definitionally the oppressor in that situation. The rules do not change based on the amount of melanin in your skin. Thankfully, their elderly victim had only minor injuries, according to the reports from CBS News. Meanwhile, the reality on the ground is that crime continues to plague the deep blue city of Baltimore and other deep blue cities just like it. And on Wednesday, The Baltimore Sun reported that most of their residents do not feel safe and are demanding a crackdown on crime from their local authorities. I empathize, but I also have to point out they seem to be confused, because the crackdown will have to come from them in the form of changing their votes, at the very least temporarily, in order to put people in power who are willing to crack down. You can't deliberately choose to elect the people who tell you right up front that they are not willing to crack down on crime, and then be upset when they don't crack down on crime and your streets become unlivable. This is known as cause and effect. For example, Baltimore's Mayor Brandon Scott continues to try to spin the numbers rather than acknowledge the issue that residents are upset about. He cited the lowest number of homicides in 50 years, but he didn't bother to tell you that this low murder rate is not due to less attempted murders. It is due to better medical care and faster emergency response systems than the ones that used to be available 50 years ago. If you were to count all of the attempted murders, attacks with a deadly weapon, as murders, then the numbers tell a very different story, which is that violence is up, something that we all know because we have eyes. And yet the mayor claimed today Baltimore is seeing its lowest numbers of homicide in 50 years. And now this strategy in our city has become an example for cities across the nation. But let me be clear, we're not done. One life lost is still one too many. We will continue to ignore the noise, and we will keep working. Yes, he is telling you up front that he will continue ignoring the unhappiness of the people and continue spinning the numbers in the modern version of who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And I mean, I have to say, if you vote for him after he tells you that this is what he's going to do, then the problem is you. This is your fate, Blue Cities, until you are willing to try something else besides the same old failed experiment that you've been trying for decades, hoping to get different results this time. Someone once said that was the definition of insanity, and the theme of the week seems to be that the Democrat Party is indeed insane. Speaking of insanely trying the same old things over and over, hoping for different results, the Olympic figure skating gold medalist, Alyssa Liu, who just won the ESPY for Best Breakthrough Athlete, was back in the headlines this week, but sadly, not for good reasons this time. Turns out that her own younger brother is taking advantage of female athletes like her by unfairly competing against them in girls' sports in a high school in California. It turns out that Joshua Liu, who now goes by Jalen, has been illegitimately competing in basically every form of girls' sports that he can think of, from track to basketball and even ultimate frisbee, on the grounds that he sees himself as a girl, which is fine. He is, of course, free to identify in whatever way he chooses to, while still competing in the appropriate category that's based on his physical biology. A heavyweight boxer can identify as a lightweight boxer if he wants to, but he still has to compete with the other physical heavyweights while identifying as a lightweight. And likewise, you can see yourself as a girl and dress like a girl and act like a girl and choose a girl's name while competing with the other boys. This is actually not difficult or complicated, despite the people that are trying to pretend that it is. Yet this man is being willfully allowed to steal achievements and opportunities from women because this form of cheating is still catered to in California. And as a result, he recently won the women's 400-meter race at the Tri-County Athletic League Finals on May 8th. And he also won every single one of the girls' 200 and 400-meter races that he has participated in for Albany High School, taking those wins away from the girls who legitimately deserved them, and stealing scholarship opportunities with the unfair advantages of his male biology. He has also played on the Albany High School girls basketball team, where as a 5'8" male junior, he has been dominating the females that he towers over. He is also described as being, quote, dominant after competing in girls' ultimate frisbee during the Ultimate High School National Invite last month in Oregon. Rather than condemning this brother of an Olympian for his blatant cheating, so-called journalists merely reported that he was, quote, extremely dominant, as, quote, one of the fastest players on the field. Yes, men are faster and stronger than women, which is why we have a separate category for women's sports in the first place. See how one thought progresses to another? That's called logic, boys and girls. Kim Jones, the co-founder of Independent Council on Women's Sports Icons, pointed out the irony to the Daily Wire that this anti-female cheater's sister, Alyssa Liu, represents the pinnacle of female athletic achievement right now, while her own brother is doing this to other female athletes. I would ask you, how many gold medals would Alyssa have won if she had had to compete against, say, the quad god, Ilia Malinin? We all know the answer to that. The only reason that she was allowed to win the gold medal that, to be clear, she deserved, is because she is not being forced to compete against male cheaters like her own brother, a privilege that her family has hypocritically decided to deny to other female athletes. A textbook case of rules for thee and not for me. As Ms. Jones correctly stated, it is a crime that girls in California are still being forced to compete against boys. Her success was possible because a category existed that recognized and celebrated female athletes on their own merits. Without a clear category for female athletes, we would not know Alyssa. And a male standard becomes the default in a backward society that devalues women for being female. A healthy society recognizes the unique merit of both male and female athletes. Now, the other truth here is that a moral person does stand up for what is right, even when it is hard, most especially when it is hard. Even when it is hard because it means standing up to family. And based on that, The moral thing for Alyssa to do would be to stand up for other female athletes, insisting that they also have a fair playing field in women's sports. And if she doesn't, I'm sorry, but that does say something about the kind of person that she is. Having said that, the ultimate responsibility for California not giving girls a fair opportunity falls on its Democrat governor, Gavin Newsom. As Ms. Jones said, when we reach a point where we demand that our middle school girls take a public stand or a female Olympian speak out against her own family, leadership has failed to do the easiest thing in the world. No girls should lose her place, recognition, or future because people in positions of authority refuse to protect female competition. This injustice must end. Alyssa Liu, however, seems content in the knowledge that her particular field of competition is safe. After the International Olympic Committee announced a new policy earlier this year that changed their previous ludicrous position by mandating that athletes must meet biological sex criteria in order to compete in female sports categories, and their eligibility will be determined based on a one-time SRY gene screening. Athletes who identify as trans are, of course, still welcome to compete, but they must do so in the category that places them in fair competition with other people who share the same physical advantages of their biological bodies. There's no reason why they can't do that and identify as whatever they want to at the same time. It is a false choice saying that it has to be all or nothing. It's not true. As the IOC president, Christy Coventry, said, "I understand this is a very sensitive topic. As a former athlete, I passionately believe in all Olympians to take part in fair competition. The policy that we have announced is based on science. The scientific evidence is very clear. Male chromosomes give performance advantages in sports that rely on strength, power, and endurance. It's absolutely clear that it would not be fair for biological male to compete in the female category." And we all know that that is true, and that this is the right decision, that it does not disenfranchise anyone, and that any arguments to the contrary are purely ideological. The numbers out in the public are also nowhere near close. 80% of Americans want women's sports and private spaces to be protected and for female athletes to be guaranteed a fair playing field where only biological women are allowed to compete in that category. There is no reason, despite the attempts to paint it otherwise, why a biological male who identifies as female cannot continue identifying as female while competing against the other biological males. And yet, Democrat politicians like Gavin Newsom do not have the balls to do the right thing here. And to be blunt, all because of a radical subset of the remaining 20%, because that 20% doesn't agree with him either, but a radical subset of that 20% who refuses to compromise with anyone else and thinks that their ideas are the only ones that should matter in the world, like there's still two. So to be clear, those fringe people are the ones that you are actually voting for when you vote for a Gavin Newsom, because he has proven that he will cater and to defer to them on policy over everyone else combined. That is his track record. Meaning that he is just their front man. You are voting for them to be in positions of power and to make the decisions. It needs to be clear. Now, maybe you still choose to do that. Fine, that's your choice. But it needs to be clear that that is the choice you are making. Because if you don't want to make that choice, then you need to vote for someone else. It's that simple.